7 days before I do, she said I can't, blamed her parents for hating my career. Then her parents revealed she told them I judged her job. She didn't just lie. She weaponized both families against each other to cover her cold feet. 7 days before I was supposed to marry the woman I'd loved for 5 years, she sat across from me at our kitchen table, still wearing the hoodie I'd bought her at a concert in Austin, and said, "I can't do this." 3 words. I can't do this. And my first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It was confusion. Pure, blinding confusion, because 72 hours earlier, this same woman had been tasting cake samples with my mother and arguing passionately that the buttercream was superior to the fondant. 48 hours earlier, she'd posted a countdown on her Instagram story. 7 days until forever. Heart emojis. A photo of our rings in a velvet box. And now she was sitting in front of me saying she couldn't do it. Not that she didn't want to. That she couldn't. Like something external was stopping her. Like the decision was being made for her. That distinction matters. Because what I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't know for another 11 days, was that nothing external was stopping her. She was stopping herself. And instead of just saying that, instead of looking me in the eyes and telling me the truth, she built a lie so elaborate and so cruel that it nearly destroyed 2 families and left me standing in the wreckage wondering what was real. Her name was Megan. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She was a dental hygienist. I was an electrician. We were the kind of couple that people called normal in the best way. No drama. No Instagram perfect performances. Just 2 people who liked each other's company, split the bills fairly, watched bad reality TV on Friday nights, and slowly, quietly built something that felt permanent. I proposed after 3.5 years. On a trail she loved, near a lake we'd camped at twice. She cried. She said yes. She called her mother before I even got the ring fully on her finger. We set the date for 14 months later. We booked the venue. We sent 140 invitations. My parents contributed $8,000. Her parents contributed $6,000. I put another $12,000 on a credit card because Megan wanted a photographer who charged more than my first car was worth, and I said yes because that's what I did. I said yes. To her. To everything. Because I believed she was saying yes back. Not just to the wedding. To me. To the life. To all of it. The planning phase was 14 months of logistics, stress, and tiny arguments that felt normal at the time but looked different now. Megan was overwhelmed, which I attributed to the scale of the event. She was anxious, which I attributed to family pressure. She was distant some days, which I attributed to work stress and wedding fatigue. I was so focused on being understanding, on not being the guy who makes his fiancée's stress worse, that I missed what was actually happening. She wasn't overwhelmed by the wedding. She was overwhelmed by the commitment. And instead of telling me that, instead of sitting me down at month 3 or month 7 or month 12 and saying, "I'm having doubts," she smiled. She planned. She tasted cake. She posted countdowns. She performed the role of an excited bride so convincingly that 140 people cleared their schedules and bought plane tickets and new outfits and took time off work to watch us say vows she had no intention of saying. The "I can't" conversation on that Tuesday night wasn't a breakdown. It was a monologue. She'd rehearsed it. I could tell because she spoke in paragraphs. No pauses. No stumbling. She said, "My parents have never supported this. They've never liked your career. They think you're not ambitious enough. They've been pressuring me for months to reconsider, and I've been trying to push through it, but I can't ignore my family." She said it with tears in her eyes. She said it with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea like she was holding herself together. She said it like a woman who had been fighting a war on my behalf and had finally lost. And I believed her. I believed every word. Because why wouldn't I? I had no reason to think Megan would lie to me. Not about this. Not about something this big. She was telling me her parents didn't approve of me, and my heart broke, not for myself, but for her. For the impossible position I thought she was in. Torn between the man she loved and the family she needed. I actually reached across the table and held her hand. I actually said, "We'll figure this out. I'll talk to your parents. We can push the date." I was trying to save her. I didn't realize she was the one sinking the ship. She said pushing the date wasn't enough. She said her parents had given her an ultimatum, him or us. She said they'd threatened to cut her off. She said her father had called me a tradesman with no future and her mother had said, "You're settling." She delivered these lines with the precision of an actress and the emotion of a daughter who was being torn apart. I sat there and I absorbed every word like a man catching punches he doesn't know how to dodge. My career. My identity. The thing I'd built with my hands and my sweat and my certifications and my reputation. She was telling me it wasn't enough. That her family had looked at who I was and decided I was beneath their daughter. And the pain of that wasn't theoretical. It was visceral. It was personal. It was the kind of thing that makes a man question whether the life he's built has any value at all. I called my parents that night. My mother picked up. I told her what Megan said. That Megan's parents didn't approve of my career. That they'd been pressuring her. That the wedding might be off. My mother went quiet. Then she said, "That doesn't sound like David and Karen." David and Karen were Megan's parents. My mother had known them for 4 years. They'd had dinners together. They'd planned the wedding together. My father and David had gone fishing twice. There had never been, in 4 years of interaction, a single comment, a single hint, a single sideways glance that suggested David and Karen had any issue with my career. My mother said, "Something doesn't feel right about this." I said, "Megan's in tears, Mom. She's not making this up." My mother said, "I didn't say she was making it up. I said something doesn't feel right." I ignored her. Because I loved Megan. And love, when it's operating at full power, has a way of muting every alarm that goes off around it. The next 5 days were chaos. I tried to contact Megan's parents directly. She begged me not to. She said it would make things worse. She said, "Let me handle my family. Please. Just give me space." So I gave her space. I canceled meetings with vendors. I called the venue and asked about postponement policies. I sat alone in the apartment we shared and stared at the seating chart pinned to our wall and felt the weight of 140 people who were about to find out that the wedding they'd been planning around wasn't happening. I felt shame. Deep, corrosive shame. The kind that makes you want to disappear from your own life. Not because I'd done anything wrong. But because I was about to become a man whose wedding was cancelled, and in the math of public perception, that means something went wrong with you, even when it didn't. Megan moved back to her parents' house 4 days before the wedding was supposed to happen. She packed a bag. She said she needed time to think. She kissed me on the cheek at the door. She said, "I love you. I just need to figure this out." She left. And the apartment filled up with the kind of silence that you can hear. Now here's where the lie collapsed. And it collapsed because of something Megan didn't anticipate. My mother is not a woman who sits still when something doesn't feel right. 2 days after Megan left, my mother called Karen. Megan's mother. She didn't ask permission. She didn't run it by me. She picked up the phone and called the woman she'd been co-planning a wedding with for over a year and said, "Karen, I need to talk to you about what's going on." What followed was a 20-minute conversation that rewrote the entire story. Karen was confused. Not defensive. Confused. She said, "What do you mean the wedding's off? Megan told us it was postponed because your son was having second thoughts." My mother said, "My son is not having second thoughts. Megan told him your family doesn't approve of his career." Karen said, "That's not true. David and I love your son. We've never said a word against him." My mother said, "Then why did Megan tell him you called him a tradesman with no future?" There was a very long pause. Then Karen said, "She told us that your son has been criticizing her career. That he said dental hygiene wasn't a real profession. That your family looks down on her." My mother said, "That has never happened. Not once. Not ever." And just like that, the entire architecture of Megan's lie came down. Not in a dramatic explosion. In a quiet, awful, disbelieving conversation between two mothers who realized, simultaneously, that the woman they both loved had been playing them against each other for months. My mother called me immediately after. She told me everything. She told me what Karen said. She told me that Megan had been feeding her parents a completely different story. That Megan had told them I was judgmental, dismissive, and that my family looked down on her career. That Megan's parents hadn't pressured her to leave me. They'd been trying to support her through what they believed was my mistreatment of their daughter. They were on my side the entire time. They just didn't know it. I sat on the edge of my bed and I felt something shift inside me. Not break. Shift. Like a puzzle piece rotating into its correct position after years of being jammed and wrong. Everything that had confused me over the past 14 months suddenly made sense. The overwhelm wasn't wedding stress. It was the stress of maintaining two simultaneous lies to two families who were in regular contact with each other. The anxiety wasn't cold feet. It was the fear of getting caught. The distance wasn't fatigue. It was the emotional withdrawal of a woman who knew she was going to blow everything up and was already pre-grieving the detonation. She'd been planning her exit for months. Maybe longer. And instead of being honest, instead of sitting me down and saying, "I love you but I don't think I can go through with this," she constructed an elaborate, multi-layered deception that turned my parents against her parents, turned her parents against me, and positioned herself as the innocent victim caught in the middle. She didn't just get cold feet. She weaponized two families against each other to cover them. I called Megan. She didn't answer. I called again. No answer. I sent a text. It said, "My mother talked to your mother. I know what you told them. I know what you told me. Call me back." She called me back 45 minutes later. She was crying. She said, "I can explain." I said, "Then explain." And what followed was the longest, most disorienting conversation of my life. Because Megan didn't deny it. She couldn't. The stories didn't match and both families had the receipts. Instead, she deflected. She minimized. She said, "I was scared." She said, "I didn't know how to tell you I wasn't ready." She said, "I thought if there was a reason, a real reason, something external, it would be easier." Easier. She destroyed two families' trust in each other, humiliated me, wasted tens of thousands of dollars, manipulated her own parents' love for her into a weapon, and she called it easier. I said, "Megan, you could have just told me you weren't ready. At any point. In 14 months. You could have said the words," she said, You wouldn't have understood, I said. You didn't give me the chance to understand. You gave me a lie instead. And you didn't just lie to me. You lied about my family to your family. You made your parents believe I was someone I'm not. You made my parents believe your parents hated their son. You poisoned every relationship around us to avoid one honest conversation. She was sobbing. She said, I know. I know. I'm sorry. And the sorry sounded real. I'll give her that. It sounded like a woman who had watched her own lie outgrow her and was finally seeing the damage from the outside. But sorry doesn't unsend 140 invitations. Sorry doesn't refund the deposits. Sorry doesn't undo the moment my father's face went gray when he heard that David had supposedly called his son a nobody. I said, we're done, Megan. Don't contact me. I hung up. And I sat in that apartment surrounded by wedding decorations and a seating chart and a garment bag with a suit I'd never wear, and I tried to figure out which part of the last 5 years had been real and which part had been the performance of a woman who was too afraid to say what she actually felt. Part 1 ends here. But the fallout was only beginning. The first thing I had to do was cancel a wedding that 140 people were expecting to attend in 3 days. Let me walk you through what that actually looks like, because people say the wedding was called off like it's a single event. It's not. It's 100 small humiliations stacked on top of each other, each one requiring you to say out loud, to another human being, it's not happening. The venue. The caterer. The florist. The DJ. The photographer who cost more than my first car. The hotel block. The officiant. Each call was its own little death. Some of them were sympathetic. Some of them were business. Most of them wanted to know if I was aware of the cancellation policy. I was. I'd be losing deposits on nearly everything. Between my contributions and my parents, we were looking at roughly $14,000 that was never coming back. For a wedding. That never happened. Because a woman couldn't say 5 words, I'm not ready yet. My parents handled it better than I expected. My mother was furious, but her fury was directed squarely at Megan, not at me. She said, you did nothing wrong. She manipulated everyone. My father didn't say much. He sat at their kitchen table and stared at his hands, and I could tell he was replaying every interaction he'd ever had with David, re-examining every conversation through the lens of what he now knew, that Megan had told her parents my family looked down on them. My father is a proud man. A quiet, proud man who works hard and doesn't ask for much. The idea that David and Karen had spent months believing he was the kind of person who'd belittle their daughter's career, that ate at him. He didn't say it. But I saw it on his face. And that's one of the things I'll never forgive Megan for. Not the money. Not the humiliation. The look on my father's face when he realized that people he respected had been told lies about who he was. My parents and Megan's parents had a phone call. All 4 of them. My mother told me about it afterward. She said it started tense and ended in something close to grief. Karen and David were devastated. Not angry. Devastated. They'd spent months comforting their daughter through what they believed was a controlling, judgmental relationship. They'd rehearsed speeches. They'd offered their home as a safe space. David had apparently told Megan, at one point, that if I ever crossed the line again, he'd handle it personally. He said this believing that I'd told his daughter her career was worthless. He said this believing I was a bad man. Because his daughter had made him believe it. When he found out the truth, David called my father directly and said, I owe you an apology. And I owe your son one too. My father said, you don't owe us anything. You were protecting your daughter. I'd have done the same thing. That conversation, between 2 men who had been unknowingly turned against each other by the same woman, was one of the only moments in this entire story that gave me something other than pain. Now let me tell you about the public fallout, because a cancelled wedding is not a private event. It's a public spectacle that plays out in real time across group chats and social media and family phone trees and workplace break rooms. 140 people knew. Some had already traveled. Some had already shipped gifts. Some had taken time off work. And every single one of them had the same question, what happened? I didn't make a public statement. I didn't post anything. I didn't explain. But silence, in the absence of information, gets filled with speculation. And the speculation was brutal. Some people assumed I cheated. Some assumed Megan cheated. Some assumed I'd gotten cold feet. Some assumed there was a secret that came out. A few people, the ones closest to the situation, knew the real story. But the real story is complicated and ugly and doesn't fit into a text message, so what circulated instead was a dozen different half-truths that made me the subject of conversations I wasn't part of and couldn't control. I'd walk into work and feel the room shift. I'd see a coworker's eyes flick away from their phone screen when I approached. I'd get texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years, fishing for information disguised as concern. Hey man, just checking in. Heard about the wedding. Everything okay? Everything was not okay. But I wasn't going to bleed in public for an audience that mostly just wanted a story to tell at dinner. Megan tried to control her own narrative. Of course she did. She'd been controlling narratives for 14 months. In the days after the cancellation, she told friends that we'd mutually decided to postpone. She told extended family that there were family conflicts on both sides that needed to be resolved. She told her coworkers that the timing wasn't right. She soft-pedaled the truth so aggressively that by the time it reached the outer rings of our social circle, the story sounded like a reasonable, mature decision between two adults who just weren't ready. It wasn't. It was one woman lying to every person in her life because the truth, that she'd manufactured a crisis to avoid admitting she didn't want to get married, was too ugly to say out loud. The truth came out anyway. It always does. Karen told her sister. Her sister told a friend. That friend was in a group chat with two of Megan's coworkers. Within a week, the real story was circulating. Megan had lied to both families, fabricated conflicts, and engineered the cancellation to avoid a conversation she was too scared to have. The response was not kind. Not because people are cruel, but because people had invested. They'd invested time and money and emotional energy and babysitters and plane tickets. And finding out that all of it was wasted because a grown woman couldn't say I need more time made them angry. Megan's best friend, a woman named Steph who had been her maid of honor, called Megan and reportedly said, "I took 3 days off work and flew across the country for this. And you're telling me you just didn't want to go through with it? Why didn't you just say that?" Megan didn't have an answer. She never had an answer. Because there was no good answer. There was only the truth. She was afraid. And instead of being afraid honestly, she was afraid destructively. I want to talk about the money, because people skip over the financial damage of a cancelled wedding like it's a footnote. It's not a footnote. It's a crater. Between deposits, non-refundable vendor payments, the photographer's 50% kill fee, the venue's cancellation penalty, and the cost of the suit, shoes, rings, and miscellaneous expenses, I was out roughly $14,000 personally. My parents lost $8,000. Megan's parents lost $6,000. Total damage, $28,000. For nothing. For absolutely nothing. For a party that never happened because one person at the center of it all couldn't open her mouth and say the truth. I asked Megan, through a mutual friend because I wasn't speaking to her directly, whether she intended to reimburse any of the costs. The mutual friend came back with this. She says she's sorry and she knows there were financial consequences, but she's not in a position to pay anything back right now. Not in a position. She had a full-time job. She had savings. She had the same financial stability she'd had for the entire engagement. What she didn't have was the willingness to assign a dollar amount to her cowardice. Paying me back would have been an admission. And Megan, even after everything, was still trying to avoid admissions. I never got the money back. Not from her. My parents never got their money back. Megan's parents, God bless them, actually offered to reimburse my parents' contribution. My parents refused. My mother said, "It's not your debt, Karen. It's hers." That gesture, from a family that had been lied to and manipulated by their own daughter, said more about who David and Karen were than any speech at a rehearsal dinner ever could. They were good people. Decent people. People who'd been weaponized by their own child's fear and were now standing in the wreckage trying to pick up pieces that didn't even belong to them. Let me talk about the shame. Because the money fades. The logistics resolve. The vendor emails stop. But the shame of a cancelled wedding, specifically the shame carried by the person who didn't cancel it, is a slow-release poison that doesn't have an antidote. For months after, I couldn't say the word wedding without my chest tightening. I couldn't attend other people's weddings. I got an invitation from a college friend 4 months after the cancellation and I stared at it for 10 minutes before putting it in a drawer. I couldn't look at engagement posts on social media without feeling a wave of something between nausea and envy. I couldn't explain to new people I met why I was single without the story coming up, and every time it came up, I had to watch their face change. The pity. The second guessing. The unspoken question behind their eyes, but what really happened? Because people don't believe that a woman would blow up her own wedding over cold feet. They assume there's more to the story. There isn't. There's less. That's the whole point. There's so much less than what everyone imagined. The truth was small and ordinary and devastating. She didn't want to marry me, and she didn't have the guts to say it. 6 months after the cancellation, I started therapy. Not because I was falling apart, but because I could feel myself hardening in ways that scared me. I was becoming suspicious of kindness. I was reading manipulation into ordinary interactions. A woman at work smiled at me in the break room and my first thought was, what does she want? That's not who I was before Megan. Before Megan, I was open. Not naive, but open. Willing to take people at their word. Willing to believe that the person in front of me was who they presented themselves to be. Megan took that from me. Not with cruelty. With performance. She showed me that someone can look you dead in the eyes, say I love you, post a wedding countdown on their Instagram, argue about cake flavors with your mother, and be secretly plotting the destruction of everything you've built together. She showed me that the performance of love can be indistinguishable from the real thing. And once you've seen that, once you've lived inside it and only recognized it after the lights came up and the stage was struck, you never fully trust the show again. My therapist told me something that helped, eventually. She said, Megan's lies weren't about you. They were about her inability to face her own feelings. She used you, and she used both families, as a buffer between herself and the truth. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of her cowardice, I said. That doesn't make it hurt less, she said. No. But it makes it yours to put down whenever you're ready. I'm still working on putting it down. Some days I carry it lighter than others. Some days I forget it's there. And some days it's a boulder on my chest at 3 a.m. and I'm back at that kitchen table watching the woman I love deliver a rehearsed monologue about why her family didn't think I was good enough, and believing every single word. I'm 29. I live alone. I work. I go to the gym. I see my therapist every other week. I have friends who know the story and don't treat me like a cautionary tale. I'm dating again, slowly, carefully, with the kind of guarded optimism that people develop when they've been burned by someone who was supposed to be safe. I don't hate Megan. I don't wish her harm. I just wish she'd been honest. One conversation. 5 words. I'm not ready yet. That's all it would have taken. Instead, she chose a 14-month performance that cost $28,000, damaged 2 families' trust in each other, humiliated a man who had done nothing but love her, and left a crater in the lives of 140 people who showed up for something that was never going to happen. Megan reached out to me once, about 8 months after the cancellation. An email. Long. Emotional. She said she'd been in therapy. She said she understood now that she had attachment issues and conflict avoidance patterns rooted in childhood. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her someday. I read it once. I didn't respond. Not because I'm bitter. Because there's nothing left to say. The conversation we needed to have was the one she refused to have 14 months before the wedding. The window for honesty closed the first time she lied to her parents about me. Every conversation after that is just cleanup. And cleanup isn't my job. She made the mess. She can mop. My parents and Megan's parents still talk occasionally. Not often. The friendship was damaged but not destroyed. Karen sends my mother a Christmas card every year. David and my father exchanged a few texts when David had a health scare last spring. There's a strange, sad solidarity between them. 4 people who did everything right, who trusted their daughter, who trusted their son, who opened their wallets and their hearts and their homes, and who got played by the one person they never thought would play them. They don't talk about Megan when they talk to each other. They talk about weather and grandkids and recipes and normal things. But the absence of Megan's name in those conversations is its own kind of scar. A hole in the shape of a woman who was supposed to connect 2 families and instead drove a wedge between them so she wouldn't have to say, "I'm scared." People ask me what I learned. I hate that question because it implies that being deceived is a curriculum. That there's a lesson hidden inside the wreckage that makes it worthwhile. There isn't. There's no lesson that justifies $28,000, months of emotional manipulation, and the sight of my father's face when he thought a man he respected had called his son worthless. But if I have to answer, if there's one thing I carry forward, it's this. Pay attention to what people do when they're uncomfortable. Not what they say. What they do. Because Megan told me she loved me every single day. But when she was uncomfortable, when the commitment got real and the weight of forever pressed down on her, she didn't come to me. She didn't tell the truth. She built a bomb out of lies and handed the detonator to both families and watched from a safe distance while they tore each other apart. The words never mattered. The actions did. And by the time I saw the actions clearly, the wedding was already dead, the money was already gone, and the woman I loved was already someone I didn't recognize.